Hi everyone, welcome to the lecture on ecosystem ecology. What you see right now is a view of the Lamar Valley in Yellowstone National Park, one of the most magnificent places on the planet, and a place that you've learned about already in this class with regard to the food webs of Yellowstone and how those experienced trophic cascades when wolves were introduced into the system. Today, our learning objectives are to understand the building blocks of mass and primary producers, then look at the process by which energy enters the ecosystem and what happens as it passes from one level to the next. Then we're going to look at the major nutrients, and then finally we'll look at how organic pollutants like pesticides can impact an ecosystem. So the major concepts: energy capture and biomass building, movement of energy through an ecosystem, and then cycles of chemicals in an ecosystem. And we'll look at nutrients, water, carbon, and pollutants. So if we look at a tree, here we have a tree in a tropical rainforest, and it's massive, it's enormous. This is just the root system in the very bottom of the trunk. And a tree like this could be as many as 250 feet tall and 10 to 15 feet in diameter. And the question then is, where does all that mass come from? Where did that tree get all the material to build itself? So they posed this question to some students and given three options: soil nutrients, soil mass, or air. And what students tended to choose was a little bit surprising and didn't really fit with proper understanding of the way that energy is captured in ecosystems and biomass is built. So let's watch a little video here. This is recorded on graduation day at Harvard and MIT, where they asked graduates of supposedly some of the best institutions in the country where that biomass comes from.
Cambridge, Massachusetts. Graduation day at Harvard and MIT.
Here's a seed.
Okay.
Okay? Now hold on to that for a second.
Okay.
Imagine that I planted that in the ground.
Okay.
And a tree grew. All right? And here is a piece of that tree.
Sure.
Okay? Now, where did all that stuff come from?
The mass came from a lot of things, I'd guess. I'd guess from water that it sucked up from the ground. I would guess from minerals that it sucked up from the ground.
Water, light, soil.
Well, I suppose in terms of raw mass, most of it's probably derived from matter in the soil itself.
And some of it comes from water, obviously, but a large amount of it comes from the nutrients that the roots absorb from the soil.
Now, what would you say to someone who said to you that most of the weight of the tree came from the carbon dioxide in the air?
I would say I would have no idea. I'd have to think about that.
I would disagree because this same volume of air wouldn't weigh this much unless it was highly compressed.
I would say that's very disturbing and wonder how that could happen.
That'd be hard to believe because carbon dioxide is, well, it's a gas, and it doesn't seem intuitive that you could add mass taking in a gas.
So this question posed to the students at these universities essentially asks, where does the biomass of organisms come from? And the answer, as it became obvious as the video went on, is that it comes from carbon dioxide in the air. That, along with water, turns into energetic molecules such as sugars and starches, and those then become the building blocks of things like wood and plant matter. So this is called productivity, which is the rate of production of biomass. The equation is that 6 carbon dioxide plus 12 water plus sunlight gives us C6H12O6 plus 6 O2 molecules plus 6 H2O molecules. And C6H12O6 is glucose, the basic sugar by which biomass is produced. So biological organisms gather energy, And it's the primary producers. They get their energy from abiotic sources, namely, in most cases, energy from the sun that they then store in the bonds of the molecules of glucose. And then consumers get their energy from eating those. Decomposers also get their energy from decomposing either primary producers or consumers. And then energy then ultimately ends up in the abiotic environment, lost as heat. So if we look at this, energy, again, comes in as sun, but plants only use a tiny fraction of this, and we'll look at those percentages in a minute. And so therefore, plants absorb a tiny fraction of this that they use to build biomass, and only then a small fraction of that actually becomes available to consumers. So if we look at the sun, we have over 1 million kilocalories per meter squared per year. And only 0.8% of that is captured in photosynthesis by plants. 45% of that goes to primary productivity and growth, and 55% is lost to respiration. Of that 45%, 11% of that is what enters the grazing food web, and 34% of that enters the decomposer food web. So if you take that 45% and you divide it into 11 and 34, that's where those percentages go. Most of it then is going to the decomposer food web, and only a small part goes into the grazing food web. The decomposer food web is made up of things like fungi and a lot of insects that then break things down for fungi to break them down further. Then when we look at things that are consumers, we take in energy that we get from plants or from other things, and about 80% of the energy that we take in is used in respiration. About 17.7% is excreted, and about 1.6% is what goes into our growth and reproduction. So of the energy we take in, almost all of it is lost through respiration and excretion. Now, if we look at this, again, energy flows through ecosystems, and most of the net primary productivity that is consumed is actually consumed in the decomposer food web, not in the consumer food web. So only a small fraction of it gets to secondary production by herbivores and carnivores. And most of that then is used for respiration, not synthesis of new tissues. So we can look at biomass in terms of production per gram of grams per meter squared per year. And if we look at primary producers and we have 1,000 grams per meter squared per year, a kilogram per meter squared per year. If we look at our primary consumers and decomposers, that becomes 200 grams. If we go to the next level, there's only 30 grams. And we go to the next level, there's only 3 grams per meter squared per year. So if an organism is at the tertiary consumer level, there's only a little bit of energy available to it for biomass production per year in a small area, so they would need to have a larger habitat, for example. So we've been talking about this and talking about the term productivity, and now we want to talk about what is net primary productivity, okay? So NPP, net primary productivity, is energy that is invested in new tissue or offspring. And it results in biomass, organic material that is non-photosynthetic organisms can eat. And it represents the amount of energy available for consumers and decomposers. So it was that 45% in the equation that I showed you earlier. Where do you expect NPP to be the highest? So if we think about this, where's there a lot of sunlight? And then if we think about that equation, it was carbon dioxide and water plus sunlight gave us the sugars. So where do we see a lot of sunlight and a lot of water? And lo and behold, tropical rainforests are one area where that is the case. Coral reefs also have fairly high productivity, but there are some other systems with high productivity, but tropical rainforests tend to be among the most productive. And it's not surprising given the combination of sunlight and water. Here we can see productivity patterns at a global scale. And you can see they're in tropical rainforest. And so this is terrestrial productivity. And then if we look at marine productivity, we see it's pretty high in the tropical zones, but it's also actually pretty high in an interesting area here where it's a cold water belt that's very productive, and another cold water high productivity area down near Antarctica. So it's not necessarily restricted to the tropical zones when it comes to marine productivity. Now, here shows net primary productivity per area per year, and some algal beds and reefs can have higher productivity even than rainforests, but tropical rainforests among terrestrial systems, and then certain wetlands can have very high productivity too, all the way down to things like tundra that have very low productivity, but that shouldn't be a surprise because tundra grows in the Arctic and there's a very short growing season.